All right, up next on our Four Kings segment this month, we're going to be talking about the great Sugar Ray Leonard. There are now two Sugar Rays, of course. There's Sugar Ray Leonard and Sugar Ray Robinson. And normally that would be considered a desecration of the name because Robinson, in my opinion and many others, is probably the greatest boxer to ever lace on gloves for a number of reasons. But if anyone is deserving, and I think Robinson said himself that Leonard was deserving of the title Sugar Ray, it was potentially Sugar Ray Leonard. So, Roy, why don't you start us off on your thoughts on Sugar Ray Leonard?
Well, I had the opportunity to be in Montreal in 1976. And I'll always remember this. There were actually, there were three fighters I was really impressed with. And the first one, the guy I was most impressed with was Howard Davis. I was really impressed with him. I had seen Sugar Ray, I think, in the National Amateurs maybe a couple of years before somewhere. And, you think copycat Ali. I'm sorry, that's what you thought. You're like, okay, copycat Ali. You didn't even think Ray Robinson because that was so many years before us.
Yeah, there were a lot of Ali copycats for a very long time.
a lot of copies, right? So I remember my brother was doing the color commentator for the 76 Olympics. Of course, I'm by his side there. And I'm listening, and Howard Cosell said, up next is the young man that everybody is comparing to. He says, I'm not going to say the word sugar. He said, but they're comparing him to Ray Robinson, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody's like, oh, okay, here it goes. And man, Sugar Ray comes into the ring. He had the tassels things on his feet. They made him take him off because in the Olympics, it's all about uniform, right? But he had a picture of his wife. I don't know if he was married at the time, but his daughter and Ray Jr. tied around his boot, right? So it wasn't illegal. But he had his picture, and he comes into the ring, and the guy he was fighting, boxing against, one of the Cubans. This was the finals. And when I tell you, I seen a guy with such hand speed, accuracy. Now we're talking about the amateurs, not a professional guy. We're talking about the amateurs. Man, this guy looked like he could have beaten anybody that particular night. Mm-hmm. And I became a Sugar Ray Leonard fan after that.
The hand speed, insane. Absolutely insane.
Totally
and anyone
insane.
and like you said, a lot of people can look fast on a stationary bag. They can look fast when they're shadow boxing, but to have the accuracy to time an opponent that quickly, anyone can learn to be fast. A lot of people don't know that. Anyone can just learn to flick their hand out fast like that.
Yeah, that's easy.
That's easy, but to throw 10 punches in a row that fast
and land out 10,
and to have a brain behind it is because Sugar Ray Leonard can be seen as an imitator at times, but if you look at it, he chose to imitate the right people for the right fights. There were fights, especially later in his career, when he was a brawler because he needed to be at that moment. So it's the brain behind it. We talked about hand speed. The thing I really think when I think about Sugar Ray Leonard is the feints. You mentioned poker players before. I can't think. I'm sure I could if I tried hard, but I'd need to think hard and long about who has a better poker face, a better game plan, who could sell shots that weren't coming. What one I always remember, I forget, maybe it was Green. There was one fight where he didn't use his upper body at all. He used a step to land a really hard punch, and he just kept his hands in the same place the whole time.
It's funny you should say that. In the Ayub Kalule, and I mean that's one of those names that nobody ever will remember, but it's a thing where he was a decent fighter, but as you just stated, is that sometimes a guy can pick a certain guy to use his talent against. It's like I can get away with this, but I can't get away with it against this guy.
Yeah,
but I can get away with it, and that was one that Ray kind of, and I tell people all the time, if you look at his career, because he even said one time, I don't deserve to have the name, Sugar Ray Robinson, right? Sugar Ray Robinson, because when he came to the Olympics, he was Ray Charles Leonard. And
Yeah.
everybody's, Ray Charles, blah, blah, right? But when he left there, he was Sugar Ray Robinson. That's how good he was. But he had the tenacity of more than any modern day fighter, I should say. I can't go back to the old too far back, but the tenacity to do the things that he wanted to do in the ring. The capabilities is the word I'm looking for, to do anything that he wanted to do in the ring against most of those guys. That's how talented he was.
And the balls to do it. And the balls to do it.
And the
is
balls to
important
do
too.
it. He would stand right in front of you. And Angelo Dundee would always go and had a little Angelo said he had trick. I guess, it's kind of like people say you get tricked. That's a trick word, right? You tell the guy, hypnotist, I think hypnotist using this, I give you this word and the guy does a certain thing.
Oh, yeah,
Angelo, yeah. Angelo did those things with those guys. There's certain things he said. And if you remember in the Hearns fight, in the 12th round, he goes and tells him, say, you're blowing it, kid. Because Angelo knew where it was going. He said, you're blowing it. So, boom, there you go. He goes back out, and the heart that he displayed to go back and take it, because that's what he did. He took that fight.
Yeah. No, he was losing.
He was losing that fight.
Yeah.
That became the Sugar Ray Leonard that we all got to know. And I think that's why he was favored in just about every fight he stepped into the ring with. Even the odds weren't that bad, but he and Marvin Hagler was 6-5. It's like 6-5 pick 'em, basically. Now, whoever thought of something like that against as great as Marvin Hagler had been. So when you saw him, you seen a guy that had the capabilities of fighting. If he had to show he had long nuts, he had no problem doing that. That's
if he had to stay out of range and hit with light shots, he could do that
yes,
too.
He could stay out of way. And then down in the Lalonde fight when he won the light heavyweight title, he jumped on a big guy and said, you know what? I mean, it was down in the lawn. Don't get me wrong, Danny. Yeah, you know what I mean. But but it was down in the lawn. But still, a fighter is a fighter, and anything can happen. But Ray went and took the title away from Danny Lalonde, the light heavyweight guy. So that's what you have to have, David, in this game, and in order to consider yourself to become one of the greatest of all times.
That versatility and the brain. That's how you're able to do it. Tall guys, short guys, brawlers, boxers, use what works against them, and that's what Leonard was really great at.
And he was great. He had the same thing that happened to him in his career was all the other guys that had the speed and the movement that it took. Is that age slows all of that down. And you go to the fight against Terry Norris, and then you go to the fight against Camacho. No
one knows when to stop.
No,
we're gonna talk either in this episode or an upcoming episode about Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. It's some people. I mean, I hope it's a show, and we'll talk about that later. But the point is that no one really knows when to stop, which I think is a good time to end the segment.
Can't argue that.
So, Marciano versus modern day heavyweights. The idea for this segment, Roy, came from your brother, because on Twitter he was posting about how, I don't know if he was just saying it to say it, just being very generous towards fighters as he normally is, or if he legitimately believes it. But he seems to think that Marciano could take down some modern day heavyweights. So I wanted to get your honest opinion on this.
Marciano, Rocky Marciano and the modern day heavyweights, David, is one of those things that you say, you look at a puncher, because that's what Marciano was. He was a puncher. And we talked earlier about fighters that could break the fighters down. Marvin Hagler, Roberto Duran, guys that could hit guys and more or less just break them down. That's what Marciano was known for. Now, let's look at who the modern heavyweights are, okay? And we'll start at Dominic Brazil. That's because these guys that have fought for the heavyweight titles over the last few years. Gerald Washington, Michael Hunter, Martin, the kid out of Los Angeles, I forget his first name, but Martin. That's pretty much, okay, Big Baby Miller, throw him into the because at one time or not before he killed his own career, he was there.
Yeah.
But so you throw him in, and even the guy out in New York, the young Polish heavyweight that was doing pretty good, then all of a sudden something happened with him. He got beaten by an average heavyweight. They overmatched him with a guy they thought was dead. I forget his name, but he'll come back to me as well. Now, I was trying to think of 10. Oh, Ruiz.
Yeah, Ruiz. Of course. Yeah.
Another
guy who ruined his own career.
Yeah, another guy. Yeah, with a fork and a knife and a fork.
Yeah, sometimes that's all it takes.
So those are the 7 guys I was naming, and the 3 champions. That's the 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, with his punching power, the way he trained, because he was always in shape, and back then all those guys were always in fight shape, because I told you, as I said earlier, in one of our other broadcasts, is that these guys took fights on 2 and 3 days or 2-week notices. They didn't always have 90 days to get ready for a fight of 60 days. So they took fights on 2 and 3 day notices. That's why their records were so big. They fought so many times.
Yeah, there was no camp as it is in modern day. There might be for the champion if it was a big fight, but
yes, that's exactly. Other than that, your camp was going to work every day, coming home and going to the gym. Those guys even had jobs. They had jobs. They worked in steel mills and places back even in those times. So they had jobs, or they chopped wood for a living. Lumberjacks, whatever they call them. But in naming those first 7, Marciano, yes, very competitive. I think because the way he conditioned and trained, I think he beats them down in later rounds, stops majority of those first 7 guys. Ortiz, being the puncher that he was, not very tall, but being the puncher that he was, he probably perhaps posed the biggest threat. Mike Hunter, not much of one. Dominic again, Gerald Washington. Those guys, no. I don't see Marciano having a problem.
But what about the Giants?
The problem comes when he gets to the champions that to be or have been. Wilder, Fury, Joshua, and the other kid that was I forget he had the IBO title or something over there. Pulev, I think his name was. But when you get to the bigger guys, it's where the problem comes, because as strong as Marciano may have been, the punches he threw in bunches, he was notorious for hitting guys on the arm, shoulders, everywhere to hurt you, because that's the whole idea, is to hit a guy and hurt him somewhere. But I believe with the reach that most of these giant fighters have, they'll be able to grab him, pull him in, push him around. And I don't see him beating a guy like Tyson Fury. I think if any of the guys, and I know this is going to sound like, any of the guys he may have had a chance against, it might have been Wilder. Wilder had no techniques. He didn't use his jab. The big right hand was all he had. And after he threw it a few times and misses him with that, Marciano was going to make him pay each time. I think the book is still out on Anthony Joshua, the Klitschko fight. Does he have courage? Yes. But then the Ruiz fight, you get to that, the first one, I mean. Yeah. And you look at that, unless you know that he gets hit, he has lapses somewhere along there, and Rock maybe knocks him out because of his punching power. But a young, fresh giant like those 3 guys I just named, I don't think he could beat them. Competitive, yes, because he was only 189 pounds, but not 190, I think, at the most. So competitive, yes. Could he beat the 3? I think it's 70-30 on that. And 70-30 in the other guy's favor.
You make a very good point there about being physical and moving Marciano around, because you're absolutely right about the reach. I feel that Marciano has very underrated defense, and I think he still has the shortest arms of any heavyweight ever. So he was so good at getting inside, and a lot of his underrated defense comes with the fact he rolled with the punches, and there are uninformed fans that are just like, oh, look, he got hit. But as far as when he got inside, I had not considered that they would be able to just lean on him, push him, just even though he could get inside like Frazier, it just like your brother moved Frazier around. You're right. I can see Fury especially moving Marciano around. I think he'd have the most trouble against Fury. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I just can't see him doing it. And like you said, and the other point was Wilder. I think he's the most vulnerable one that I've had a chance to see right now.
Because even though he has the reach and the crazy right hand, he'd have to be shooting down against a moving target the whole time. And there's not that much of a weight difference, even with the height.
Yeah, exactly. You're only talking about, 217 to about maybe 190. And then even then, Rock come in at 200 pounds, and you basically got a dead even fight on the weight size standpoint.
Could you imagine him could you imagine Rocky on steroids? And he's not caught. or on one of those one of those endurance drugs.
Where he's really working. Man, the guy could be a monster. The heavyweight champion. This is the thing about it. They called George a giant in 1973. 6'4", George is about, when he won a title, he's like 217. But Joe Frazier had been 5'11",
something like that. Yeah, on a good day.
Patterson the same way. Liston was only 6'1" or 6'2". Ali was 6'3", about 6'2" or 6'3", but he wasn't big. I always say this about Ali. Ali was one of those guys. He didn't seem as intimidating, as big as it, because you looked at him and you wasn't afraid. You weren't afraid of him. Most of those guys, you see George and Liston, saw the big shoulders. And you go like,
intimidating.
I wouldn't mess with that guy. Intimidating. Yeah. But Ali was like a guy in a suit. His body wasn't in proportion with muscles cut up or anything like that.
No, not until he took his shirt off, and then definitely not in his later career. Yeah.
You see him later, later on, and you started. He was kind of up here. He was kind of thick, but that's because it said before the movement hadn't become as much anymore. It was as much as it was before. But he didn't have the intimidating look. Sonny Liston, George, even Joe Frazier was stocky and strong looking. Patterson was another one. He didn't look very overwhelming, but the techniques and the punches he had. But Rocky Marciano was different because Marciano had fists, that was like this, almost 2 of our hands to a point. And when he threw a punch, you seen everything in him. When he threw
full body weight, stepped into it, torso.
Stepped into it.
Yeah.
Yes, the neck, the vein popped out his neck. When he hit you with it, man, he got you. That's where maybe the even part comes in, but I still think he has a difficult time with the big hits.
Maybe throw on a very good day with a break between rounds, I'd say 50 full body hard punches on the heavy bag. But Marciano, before it's like they start to, I could go full power longer, but after those 50 punches, if they're in a row, I'm not going to be able to keep that power up. But Marciano could do it for 15 rounds. And that's what makes him.
Yes.
That's what makes him scary. If
that was a story that he at one time, but Marciano wanted to go back to the 20 round thing. He wanted to make a limit of 20 rounds.
Oh yeah,
and I can believe that because he was that kind of. He was a throwback to the guys of the Jack Johnson type guys, man. The Jess Willards, guys who went 25, 35, 40 rounds.
Almost seems inhuman nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you start talking 6 round. Most of these guys, man, what round is 6 round? Oh God. I got 4 more to go, 6 more to go. Yeah, you do.
There's this program that was like I think Ali made it while he was out of commission, basically, when he was kicked out, about people who could have potentially beat him. And they saved Marciano for the end of that segment. And then Ali goes, "Oh, that's a good choice to save for the end. I'm not sure." And he's like, "This is Muhammad Ali. Are you crazy?" And then he goes, the reason he gave was that he's like, he's a whole different kind of fighter who could have, he said something like, who could have half their nose hanging off and still come in and finish you. Which is crazy.
Have you ever seen that fight, by the way, where the guy spits his nose?
Yeah, was it Charles that was against?
As a Charles.
Yeah.
As a Charles.
No, I've never seen it in good quality. I've seen it a lot, but I've never seen it uploaded anywhere in good quality. I should probably search for it because I've seen a picture, and oh my God, the video does not do it justice. It was his face was off. He had a piece of his face dangling off of the rest of his face, and he goes, "Okay, I guess I need to finish it."
Leonard and Hearns and Hagler.
Yeah, same deal.
You got to get this thing over with. That's the whole idea, So again, you have to, and see, that's another thing in even making these in describing these types of fights, David, is that you have to put so much into context. for what the other guy has. Marcianos, the Fraziers, the Lewis, the Alis, the Georges, when they're the Holmeses. I don't want to throw Larry Holmes off of that because Larry Holmes is another guy had some fights he had to come back to.
Yeah.
I'm talking about champions more than I am anyone. But when you look at those guys from some of the odds that they kind of had to come back from, so you have to throw that along with it yourself. So now, if Rocky Marciano was in a fight with maybe Tyson Fury, and then we saw Fury get a bad cut in the fight not too long before. But if he's in a fight and the guy's going nowhere, and Marciano is steady in his chest all night long, does Tyson Fury finish that fight? Does he have that in him? Does Joshua have that in him? That hunger that I always tell you about. Does he have it? Do they have it? See, regardless of what you say about the sport of boxing, it's still the real, like MMA, they're the real, true Hunger Games sport. And I wonder, and maybe we'll never get a chance to see. I think Joshua got up in the Klitschko fight,
and Fury got up from Wilder,
and Fury got up from Wilder.
But neither of them had a piece of their body hanging off.
Right, nobody had a piece of their body that was about to hang on the canvas when they got it with blood. Today, that fight would have been stopped.
Oh, immediately after it happened,
would have been stopped.
Yeah,
but it's one of those things. I guess if anybody, other Charles has to go like, well, "Damn, ref, couldn't you see? The guy was bleeding like a pig."
Yeah, poor Charles. he got close.
He got close.
If it was anyone but Marciano, would have had it for sure.
Anyone but him would have happened because he fought. With the fight. Then later on, he and Jersey Joe has a tremendous fight. Before he gets caught with a shot as well. But again, we're talking about 189, 190 pound guys, David, and even with all that, we have to wonder, well, if they were fighting on an equal size basis, yeah, no doubt. But at what point would that weight have made a difference? Fury came in 273 against Wilder. It's a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight. So it's kind of hard to consider.
But
I don't see it. That's not to contradict my brother because he knows more than I do about what he's fought. I ain't gonna say he knows more than I do, but he fought. He lived it. I lived it. I didn't do it, but I know, and I take it for a lot of things he said, and that's we at times. But
me and your brother rate Marciano apparently a lot higher than most people do nowadays in regards to modern day boxing. So I think we're all pretty much in agreement there.
Well, these writers are, these guys are writers who went to this school for journalism, that school for journalism. They sit in front of a computer, they look at it. They never really analyze fights. They just go by what they read, and they look and say what Tyson would have done. You cannot include two people in the sport of boxing. You cannot not include in your three greatest levels. I'm not talking about the modern guys. Joe Louis, Marciano, and Jack Johnson. You have to include those three in anything that you do.
Okay, but the Marciano versus Lewis fight wasn't fair because Lewis was 87 years old.
Yeah, 87, just about to turn 88. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What's that movie?
Joe caught him with a shot, though. Joe caught him with a shot.
That's from Coming to America. You've seen that skit?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, okay.
Guys, he was 87 years of age.
He was 137.
100. But
But there's a point there, though. There is a point there.
Well, but David, there was a lot of, at that time, the story was that Marciano was a mob-back fighter. And I think that hurt him along the way, too, to be honest with you. People kept saying, well, the guy didn't want to lose. He was afraid to win the fight because if you wanted to fight, the mob had bet on Marciano. If you lost, something might happen to you. We have no way of knowing, no idea of knowing it. But we do know that there was a time when the gambling part of the sport was controlled by the mobsters.
Yeah.
And maybe they had their hands in on a lot of fighters as well. I don't know. But to say that would take all the credibility away from the hard work that Rocky Marciano put in.
I think the footage backs that he won. I mean, I don't know because I don't know if even all the fight footage exists. But the fights that he won convincingly on film.
Yes.
It doesn't look like the guy took a dive because if the guy was going to take a dive, he should have taken a dive before he took 100 hard shots and then went
That's
down
what
to
I'm
the
saying.
12.
You don't get the crap. You don't leave your brain scattered on the ring and then decide I'm going to go down.
If they did take a dive, then and Marciano knew about it, then Marciano's kind of a jerk because he hit him really hard.
Yes.
Like you don't need to take a dive so convincingly you get knocked out for 5 minutes, man.
the man had a mule kick for a punch. Let's put it like that. So no, I don't believe that. I mean, again, gambling and sports have gone together for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
Why they chose boxing to make it more of a?
Because there's only one person that you need to if you try to bribe the New York Jets, or it's not going to work.
No.
You have to pay way too much to every single player, and then someone's going to spill the beans. Boxing.
Well, you get a Black Sox scandal every once in a while. Go back to. No, Joe said ain't so, Joe. But you're right. It's a lot harder to do. And then you get a guy that's making. I mean, back in those days, get me wrong, they were making $25,000 and $50,000. That was a lot of money in the 40s and 50s for fights. And you come along and give a guy $20,000 just to say, "Hey, man, look here, I need you to find the cameras after 2 or 3 rounds." And the guy might say, because most of the time it had to do more with betting than it was winning.
Have you seen the really old school film On the Waterfront?
Oh yes,
love that film.
A contender.
Yeah,
I could have been a contender.
He didn't. That's the thing.
Been somebody.
That's what gets me about that film. Is the main, for those who haven't seen it, listening in, the main character didn't want to throw the fight. He was on his way to potentially being champion, and his brother had his hand in. He was in with the mafia, and his brother walked into the dressing room before and said, "Tonight's not your night." And if he didn't want his family killed or himself killed, he had to just throw the fight. And the fact stuff like that used to happen, and hopefully doesn't anymore. But the fact it used to happen, you think about those guys like we were talking about a while ago who came from poverty, who worked their way up. And then I bet there were scenarios where they worked their way up only so far, and then they didn't have a choice to work their way up.
Well, see, there again, we turn, and I keep hating to say this, but we turn to the media because then it was the movies that depicted that, right?
Yeah.
Just like with the Harder They Fall, the same thing with Bogart and those guys and Steiger. But when you look at a guy like in the movie The Waterfront, or even Champ, I mean, it's a lot. Joe Walcott was actually in that movie The Harder They Fall too. That's amazing dude, and his name was George. But it's in that particular. When you saw Marlon Brando, probably the greatest method actor of our time, no doubt.
Undoubtedly.
When you saw him, he was so convincing in saying that, and everybody said, I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
Could have been somebody, yeah.
Could have been somebody. And those are the things. And that's what made the sport of boxing, really, as the mob may have seemed like, but that, I think, had as much to do with guys deciding, you know what, I'm going to be in this, man, the great ones. I'm going to be in. You got journeyman fighters. There are some guys who take a fight and realize, and I mean, I've been around too long to know better. They realize they can't beat a guy, but I'm going to try to be as competitive as I can. But guess what? I'm not going to get killed.
Yeah.
I'm
not worth it. No.
Yeah, it's not worth it because I'm going to be paid one way or the other. I'm not getting paid by the round. I'm getting paid by the fight.
Yep.
That happens. But most of these guys, when they jump into this game, they think they're pretty good until they get knocked down a peg, But that's the sport. But Marciano could have competed at any level, just about to reiterate what George may have said. But he could have competed at any level. Let's put it like that.